Hey guys, Chompadong back with you, and this is the NFL rundown for Week 11. We are into the domination station phase where we've already discussed trimming down the player pool, getting an idea of who we like to historically hit value based on. Are they home? Are they favored? Are they on a team implied to score points this week? Do they get a lot of targets, a lot of touches? Is everything stacked in their favor this week to make us feel like they're in a very safe spot to pay off their salaries? And what we do next is we start making a little bit tougher decisions now. We look into the domination station, we sort by fantasy points per dollar, and we look at some ownership reports. And this is early in the week. These will update several times between now and Sunday. And there will be players. Last week at this point, Mike Davis had no projection. By the end of the week, Mike Davis was universal chalk. So this will change, but right now, let's go through. Let's show you how we do this. We set up the domination station, whatever site you want to play. And another thing to tell you guys is when I look at the research station for quarterbacks and wide receivers, I make sure that you're getting to see it as I get to see it. I don't look ahead and plan these videos. They're very off the cuff, they're very casual, and I think that they maybe translate better that way, or they teach better that way, because when you hear me kind of sifting through stuff, you kind of see where my mind is going and what I'm trying to do. And that gives you a first look along with me. It's not some pre-planned, pre-scripted thing where at minute 8 I'm going to go into this. I don't know. I have no idea where we're going to go, what we're going to do. But I want you to see that the routine is the same. We've done this for what, like 4 weeks or 5 weeks now? The routine is always the same. Okay? And so now that we've hit this part of the video, we'll go down to the main slate and we will take the fantasy points per dollar column and we'll sort it to the top. And now that I've done that, all players, right? And I see I've got some initial ownership projections in there. I'm going to look at the quarterbacks. I'll just go position by position, start thinking up thoughts. Who do I like? Well, Cam Newton is supposedly underpriced for what he may do. You may believe that projection. You may think it's full of crap. I don't know. I don't think he's very safe. I'm a little bit worried about it myself. But if I read cheat sheets later in the week that coaches think that he's great, it may sway my opinion. But right now, I'm looking for where is our buddy Herbert, and he's way down the list, and he's not going to be heavily owned. But if you look this week, nobody initially is too chalky. Looks like everyone's going to go to Lamar Jackson, and he may have a great week. And by everybody, I mean 11%. He may have a great week. Do you trust him? I don't this year. I don't think that he's the cash safe quarterback. But guess what? Everybody's going to be fairly spread out based on these projections between Cam and Lamar and Justin Herbert. And you may find a few of these other guys sprinkled in there as well. So that doesn't mean that your pick is overwhelmingly safe or smart or any of that. It means, once again, we don't necessarily know. There's a lot of question marks around this particular slate. There's a lot of um, evenly matched up turds, if you will. And that means that some of them are going to work and some of them aren't, and getting the right mixture is going to be very, very important. And even when the safest pick that you see on the board isn't really that safe, if our normal dudes weren't on bye weeks or weren't on Thursday nights or off of the main slates, when the safest that you have is still pretty risky, it's tournament time, baby. Because you don't know and I don't know and nobody knows. And so that's not a real safe environment for cash games, in my opinion. That means that we should branch out, and instead of 80-20, drop down a little bit more, 60-40 or something like that, to tournament play, because we want to make sure that when we don't know what the outcome is going to be, we might have a really bad week, we might have a really, really great week. And if I happen to have one of those really, really great weeks, I want to get paid. I don't want to end up doubling my money in a double up. I want to get flipping paid. And this is the type of week that can do it for anybody, because nobody freaking knows what's going on. Okay? So that said, I haven't seen anything to sway me off of Herbert just yet. 8,500 on FanDuel's a little high. I don't know if I'd have to check other deeper metrics to see if I feel like I do feel like he's a little safer than Lamar Jackson, but I feel like both are prone to shit the bed. I mean, that's just the way this year has gone. If we look at running back, Really, Balaj? I'm not a believer yet there either. Damn. Low ownership, which is a good thing. Your chalky guys, Mike Davis again, even though he's priced up a good bit. Duke Johnson again. DeAndre Swift, ride the hot hand. Um, James Robinson against the tough Steeler defense? I don't know about that. James Conner, don't trust. Dalvin Cook is yes. Dalvin Cook and Mike Davis are probably the two. And then you're probably fighting for a third guy. If you want to go Duke for cheaper, you want to go one of these other guys, whatevs. If you can get Kamara in there, good. God love you. I mean, Cook and Kamara might be the two safest options, but my God, you're going to spend about $75,000 in cap to do it. So that's probably price prohibitive. I might lean a little bit more, man, pass catching backs against Atlanta, but I still might lean a little bit more to Dalvin Cook personally. But these are the guys. That's what you're going to find in your cash games and whatnot. Some other guys carrying ownership. Aaron Jones again. That feels high. I feel like he shit the bed on so many people. They're going to be upset. Um, and against Indianapolis's reputation of being a tougher defense. But again, those are kind of the guys. You're looking for a cheaper value back. Maybe Balaj is that for you. He's probably got more upside than Duke Johnson. Duke Johnson, I mean, David Johnson doesn't produce in that offense. We said it last week. I mean, man, I don't know. And that's about it for kind of like the cheaper guys. Antonio Gibson gets work, dude. Maybe he's a good pivot off of some of these guys if you want. Make him pivot off of both Davis and Duke Johnson. So anyway, that's kind of where the mind travels in terms of what we're looking at maybe initially. We'll look as we go, as time goes on. Robbie Anderson, good play. Terry McLaurin, good play. Keenan Allen, good play. Right? You might need a couple especially if you're going to try and get Cook and Kamara. You're going to need cheapies. You might end up on a Robbie Anderson, Curtis Samuel, and that sucks because you won't have Bridgewater. But you might take somebody like Devontae Parker again, whatever. I'm looking again at these ownership projections. I see Devontae Adams is going to be highly owned. Not at the expense of Kamara and Cook for me, but, whatever. To each his own. Look down here a little bit more. Julio Jones. I mean, people bet the names. They bet favorites. They bet overs. They root for scoring. They like the big studly names. Doesn't mean they always make sense. We're trying to stick to the top of this list when it comes to fantasy points per dollar because these are the guys that are technically underpriced. And these two would be guys that I would put in any lineup. And Keenan Allen. If I did these three and then pick between some running backs, I don't think I'm in the worst position other than the fact that wide receiver is more volatile than running backs. Wide receiver is going to let me down more often than running back. So I try to stay away from that where I can. But I'm not, and I don't usually play ultra chalky wide receivers. But they look a little bit spread out this week as well. Let's see if we can find a tight end worth of crap. I mean, this was like punt central. Hunter Henry, Mark Andrews, Noah Fant. And that is about it. Everybody else is junk. When it comes to ownership, when it comes to fantasy points per dollar, here we are again up here towards the top of the world with Henry and Andrews. Hooper would be a slight pivot. Fant. So if I'm looking salary wise, if I've got the $800, probably take Andrews. I mean, Fant and Hunter Henry are okay if I need the $800. I'm not going to worry about it too much. Ebron's not too far away. He's at lower ownership. This might be a spot where you might take a little bit of the lower ownership in a good spot, in a good matchup, in a good offense that's at home, that's favored, that's implied to score, that targets its tight end in the red zone, etc. A little bit more just to get a little bit off of some of the ownership and make yourself a little bit different. Like if you're running high volume head-to-heads, high volume head-to-heads kind of lean more towards hybrid lineups than pure cash lineups, only because the upside does reward you a little bit in terms of getting you closer to sweeping the entire lot. But it also adds to your downside where you only get 30% back instead of 45%, whatever. You have to make that call for yourself. I know Geek runs hybrids in head-to-heads a lot, likes it. He likes to do it. I agree with that sentiment. So that's, food for thought there in terms of you're the 3 or 4 guys that you're going to be probably picking between. And then defenses, now we'll see what the price. I told you those prices were higher, but there's Chargers, which we targeted already this week. Who else did we mention? Pittsburgh at 5,000, of course, and there's your chalk defense. So easy to pivot off of that. It's not too often that the defense completely wrecks you in cash game. And if they're at 15% ownership, that doesn't wreck you in a cash game. That's technically the chalk pick, but it's not all that powerful in the chalk realm because 85% of the people didn't play him, which means you've got 35 or 40% more of the world that you can beat and get into a cash game with. So you don't need any of these defenses. There are no mandatory locks in this world. So you might look to pay down a little bit with somebody that has a decent chance at doing well. And, that very well might be a little bit less for the Chargers, this week. Maybe your Minnesota Vikings a little bit less than the Chargers, even 4,400, save $600 there. You want to take Washington? I'm not going to argue with you. You want to take Detroit against Carolina and hope that Bridgewater loses his ass and throws intercept. I mean, yeah, I'm not going to argue with you, right? Houston against Cam, that you can get bad Cam. These are a little bit more risky. I'm looking a little bit more for big favorites and opponents with low implied team totals. And the reason why is I want game script in my favor, where these guys late in the game are generally going to be dropping back and airing it out. Because that's what's going to allow my defense to say, everybody blitz. They ain't running it. And it's going to allow my safeties and corners to sit back in coverage and ball hawk. And that leads typically to turnovers, sacks and turnovers, sacks and turnovers, sacks and turnovers. That's how defenses score. You get me 6 to 10 points out of my defense, and I'm pretty good. Yeah, I get lucky at pick 6 and get me 14 to 16 points, and yeah, even better. But generally, I'm looking for the game script to tell me what defenses to take, okay? So in recap, that's about all you need to do for this to get some ideas of where that chalk's going to go. Your decision right now is, can you really even do the double high at running back this week? And maybe with a Jameis Winston, maybe you can. Jameis Winston paired with Alvin Kamara and then Dalvin Cook, and then just look for value elsewhere. Wouldn't be the worst way to go. But this is what this sheet starts to tell you. And the next thing that I would do is I would start looking over here at the chalkboard, because that's going to put it all out in an easy laid out formula for you to watch as well. And you know that the people at the tops of those categories, those position categories, just like here, when the chalk's at the top, it's going to be a cash game type of pick. And on top of that, you're going to see those high points per dollar with some of those picks. And that's what's going to indicate that the field is on a certain player. So then you get on that certain player yourself, and you know you're making the right decision, win, lose, or draw. What you're doing then from there in some tournament type lineups is starting to think of obvious game script situations that flip, obvious pivots. You see last week Devontae Adams was highly owned, and DeAndre Hopkins was flying under the radar. So you pivot to DeAndre Hopkins. This week you see that Dalvin Cook is highly owned. So in a tournament, maybe you take a Cousins and Thielen stack, or a Cousins and Jefferson stack, or a Cousins Thielen Jefferson stack, right? And then run it back with CeeDee Lamb or something like that, and hope that game sort of shoots out. Those are the types of pivots that you start making in tournaments, that you're still using those obvious chalky plays to then make sensible pivots off of them. If this is being used by everybody, maybe this isn't. If this player is being really, really highly owned this week, then maybe this guy at a similar price isn't being owned. Or maybe this guy, where they paid up at running back, I paid down at running back. Or maybe instead of using the running back, we used the quarterback and the wide receiver in the same game. Those types of things are very standard in the industry, and that's what's going to help you build stronger tournament lineups too. Hopefully this stuff helps you guys out. Hopefully you guys have got a good kind of pointer down the road. You can start playing with some lineups, and you're just waiting for cheat sheets at this point. And the cheat sheets may add to what you're doing. They may sway you in a tiebreaker situation a little bit, but I think you've got a little bit of a feel right now for how that slate's going to go this week and where that chalk's going to land in those cash games. And hopefully you're on it as well. Peace out, homelies.